You've taken everything from me, and you didn't even look back, I whispered to the empty living room as the morning sunlight streamed through the half-open blinds, casting thin stripes across the polished oak floors. I set the coffee cup down gently on the counter, its warmth seeping through my fingers as if it could offer comfort, though the quiet was deafening. The house smelled faintly of vanilla and pine from the candle I had lit before sunrise, and every familiar corner seemed to mock me, each photograph on the wall a reminder of years spent building a life with Thomas. I walked slowly toward the window, peering out at the driveway where my car usually waited, noting the crisp fall leaves swirling in lazy circles, feeling that same circle of emptiness inside me. 2 days ago, I had seen the subtle changes, Thomas taking longer walks without me, locking drawers, typing furiously on his laptop in the evenings. I had dismissed them at first, attributing it to age, to the quiet restlessness of a man approaching 72. But the letter that arrived yesterday was different, plain white, typed with cold precision, notifying me that all joint accounts were closed and my access revoked, that my name was removed from the property deed, and that Thomas would be moving forward with changes I would have no say in. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the words over and over, letting them sink in, feeling the weight of decades of shared life compressed into a single cruel moment. Michael's voice echoed in my memory, saying, "Mom, Dad's just taking care of what's his," as if it justified everything, as if loyalty could be measured in dollar amounts and signatures on documents. I set my hand on the smooth granite countertop, the cold surface grounding me, and I remembered the first morning I had poured coffee for Thomas when we moved into this house, the laughter of our children filling the sunlit kitchen, the smell of toast and eggs, the soft chaos that had once felt like home. I breathed in slowly, letting the past and present merge, understanding that there was no dramatic outburst necessary, that the power lay in observation, in patience, in the quiet reclaiming of my own presence. I moved to the dining room, noting the place where family photos had been rearranged, some tucked away, some turned face down, and a pang of clarity hit me. Every subtle action, every omission had been a thread woven deliberately. I didn't flinch, didn't raise my voice. I simply walked to the window again, watching the street, feeling the crisp October air on my face, and allowed the smallest of smiles to curl at the corner of my lips. This was not surrender, this was assessment. This was the beginning of understanding, the quiet setting of stakes, the invisible declaration that I would not vanish quietly. Each creak of the floorboard beneath my feet, each shadow cast by the blinds, seemed to echo my thoughts, reminding me that presence alone could be a statement, that observing the movements of those who sought to diminish me could be more powerful than confrontation. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, marking minutes that felt both interminable and precise, as I planned, silently, for the steps I would take, knowing that awareness was the first form of reclaiming control, and that the morning sunlight on the oak floor, so ordinary and unremarkable to anyone else, was my witness, my ally, and the first element in a day that would unfold with careful, deliberate clarity. The kitchen was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock. Evelyn Parker moved slowly, methodically, pouring herself a cup of coffee and taking a careful sip, feeling the warmth spread through her fingers and into her chest, anchoring her in a way that the cold reality outside could not. She glanced at the calendar on the wall, the days marked in neat handwriting from months past, and it struck her how ordinary life had once been, how familiar routines had created a sense of comfort now disrupted. Michael had called last night, his voice polite but distant, discussing business matters as though the upheaval in family life was merely a background noise, unworthy of the attention it deserved. Evelyn had listened, nodding softly, her expression neutral, concealing the turbulence she felt inside. Every familiar item in the house seemed to whisper memories, the silver tea set polished carefully every Sunday, the couch where she and Thomas had spent quiet evenings reading side by side, the family photos lining the staircase, each smile frozen in time, each one a testament to years of shared life now overshadowed by absence. She walked to the living room, placing her coffee on the side table, and allowed herself a moment to observe the quiet sunlight filling the space, the way it highlighted the dust motes dancing lazily in the air, a subtle reminder that time moved steadily regardless of human interference. Evelyn opened the drawer where she kept letters and notes, sifting through the stack with fingers tracing familiar handwriting, a ritual that grounded her and allowed her to reflect without rush. Each envelope held a fragment of history, a memory of moments carefully documented, small tokens of affection or celebration that now felt like clues in a puzzle she was only beginning to understand. Outside, the wind rustled the autumn leaves, a gentle, persistent reminder of the passage of seasons, of life continuing in its relentless rhythm, indifferent to human schemes. She made her way to the study, opening the blinds to let in more light, revealing the tidy arrangement of books and papers that had once provided solace and inspiration. Sitting at the desk, she began taking notes, organizing her thoughts, cataloging discrepancies she had observed over the last few weeks, quietly plotting a path forward. She did not rush. There was no frantic energy in her movements, only precise, deliberate attention to each detail, each irregularity, knowing that understanding was the foundation for any action. The quiet persistence of her day was interrupted only by the occasional ring of her phone, a message from a friend checking in, asking if she was well, if she needed company. Evelyn smiled faintly at these gestures, a subtle warmth breaking through the tension, realizing that she was not entirely alone, that allies existed if she cared to notice them. As she set down the pen and stretched her hands, feeling the slight stiffness that came with age, she acknowledged the weight of the situation, the challenges ahead, and yet also the clarity that had begun to form, a quiet resolve taking root. Every observation, every careful note, every moment of reflection was a step toward regaining balance, toward understanding the intricate web of intentions around her, and she embraced the calm strength that came from measured patience, knowing that in this stillness lay her greatest advantage, a quiet force that would guide the days to come. The afternoon light filtered through the kitchen windows, casting long, warm streaks across the countertop where Evelyn Parker sat with a notebook open, her pen poised, yet still. She watched the garden beyond, noting the way the wind shifted the branches of the maple tree, leaves falling in quiet arcs onto the lawn, and each movement seemed to mirror the subtle shifts in her household, unnoticed yet deliberate. Michael had left for the office early, brief words exchanged over breakfast that felt rehearsed, almost automatic, and the absence of his attention weighed heavier than any confrontation could. Evelyn reviewed the papers she had organized, tracing her finger over lines of dates, transactions, and notes that outlined the pattern she had sensed in Thomas Parker's actions over the last weeks. She did not rush. There was a rhythm to her understanding, a careful layering of observation and deduction. In the living room, the furniture remained precisely where she had left it, each chair, each side table, each family photograph in alignment as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting. She recalled the quiet mornings when she had arranged the table for brunch, the aroma of fresh coffee and toasted bagels filling the air, laughter from her children echoing from room to room, a tapestry of ordinary life now interwoven with subtle betrayal. A message popped up on her phone, a simple note from a friend who had sensed the tension, offering perspective without intrusion, a reminder that she was not alone in noticing the nuances that others overlooked. Evelyn considered the importance of timing, the slow accumulation of information, each detail a brick in the foundation of the awareness she was building. She walked slowly to the hall where family photographs lined the walls, studying the expressions frozen in frames, recognizing that many smiles hid intentions that had become clearer with recent events. The soft ticking of the clock was steady, almost comforting in its predictability, as she listed her observations in neat columns, noting discrepancies, recording inconsistencies, planning steps without urgency but with precision. Every sip of coffee, every glance out the window, every page turned in her notebook was an act of quiet preparation, a deliberate awareness that strengthened her resolve. The light shifted as the afternoon waned, the shadows lengthening, and Evelyn felt the steady calm of clarity settle over her, a quiet power born of patience and discernment, knowing that the days ahead required careful navigation, observation, and measured action, and that the simplest of details, noticed and acted upon, could alter the course of decisions made by those who underestimated her presence. She closed the notebook briefly, allowing her mind to wander over strategies, possibilities, and outcomes, each considered in silence, each weighed without haste, understanding that her strength lay in composed vigilance and in the subtle assertion of awareness that required no dramatic display but demanded attention in its quiet insistence. The evening settled over the Parker residence, a gentle amber glow filtering through the living room windows as Evelyn Parker moved quietly from one room to the next, each step deliberate, measured, her eyes observing every detail that might offer insight into Thomas Parker's intentions. The family photographs along the walls seemed to watch silently, their familiar smiles now reframed in the context of subtle deception and careful manipulation. Evelyn paused at the mantel, fingers brushing over the frames, recalling the quiet mornings of breakfast with Michael and the laughter of children echoing through the house, and yet she felt the undercurrent of absence and pretense, the unnoticed shifts that had hinted at the present situation. She opened a drawer where bills and statements were kept, reviewing them with precise attention, noting inconsistencies and patterns that had previously seemed trivial but now formed a clear narrative of preparation and exclusion. Outside, the autumn air carried the faint scent of pine and damp earth, and the gentle sway of the branches reminded her that time passed relentlessly, unaffected by human intentions. Evelyn brewed a fresh cup of tea and carried it to the study, where the sunlight highlighted the neat stacks of papers and notebooks, evidence of her quiet observation and careful documentation. She sat at the desk, pen in hand, organizing her thoughts and recording details methodically, aware that her composure and patience were more powerful than confrontation or anger could ever be. The sound of a distant lawn mower interrupted the stillness, and for a moment she imagined Michael arriving home, oblivious to the careful assessment taking place in his absence, and she smiled faintly at the irony. Each page she turned revealed more than facts, it revealed intention, a sequence of calculated moves designed to create distance and control. Evelyn took note of every subtle sign: locked cabinets, altered schedules, phone calls she was excluded from, and emails she had only now begun to see with clarity. She leaned back in her chair, sipping the tea slowly, letting the warmth ground her as she contemplated the larger picture, the strategy that would guide her next steps. The room was filled with the quiet rhythm of her movements and the soft light of the setting sun, and in that calm, she found the space to plan, to anticipate, and to prepare. Her resolve did not come with haste or noise, it came with careful attention, measured awareness, and the understanding that knowledge, observation, and patience were the first forms of reclaiming presence and authority. Every shadow cast by the furniture, every reflection in the window, seemed to underscore the subtlety of her approach, the power of stillness, and the potential for deliberate action rooted in comprehension rather than emotion. As the day faded into night, Evelyn Parker remained poised and attentive, the quiet strength of awareness surrounding her like a protective layer, each thought, each note, each observation a step toward reclaiming the control that had been quietly undermined, a deliberate and patient preparation for the days to come. The next morning, Evelyn Parker rose with a quiet sense of purpose, the soft light of dawn spilling across the kitchen counters as she prepared breakfast with deliberate care. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and toasted bagels filled the space, a familiar comfort, yet tinged with the knowledge that the household was no longer ordinary, that subtle shifts had changed the rhythm of everyday life. She reviewed her notes from the previous day, each line meticulously recorded, tracing patterns of absence, altered schedules, and carefully hidden correspondence, each element forming a clearer picture of Thomas Parker's intentions. Michael had left early, his brief greetings tinged with habitual detachment, and Evelyn listened without reaction, observing, storing information silently. Outside, the autumn wind stirred the leaves in the driveway, each movement mirrored in the quiet rhythm of her reflections, a reminder that life continued beyond the walls of the house, unobserved yet steady. She moved to the living room, brushing her fingers along the polished wood of the side tables, noticing small changes she had not remarked upon before, a family photograph slightly tilted, a misplaced book, subtle adjustments that spoke volumes in their silence. Evelyn sipped her coffee slowly, letting the warmth settle and focusing on the calm clarity that patience afforded her. Each moment of observation, each careful step in her day, was an exercise in deliberate awareness, a recognition that understanding preceded action. She catalogued the irregularities she had noticed, recording times, dates, and subtle cues in her notebook, creating a roadmap of comprehension, a quiet assertion of her presence and insight. The sunlight shifted, drawing elongated shadows across the floor, and Evelyn took note of the passing hours, knowing that measured timing was essential for any plans she would enact. In the stillness, she felt a faint reassurance from the familiarity of her surroundings, the orderly stacks of mail, the neat rows of kitchen utensils, the careful placement of decorative items, all evidence of her long stewardship, all reminders that she maintained control through diligence and attention. The sound of a bird outside the window, distant and soft, punctuated the morning, emphasizing the tranquility that contrasted with the underlying tension in the household. Evelyn returned to her desk, reviewing correspondence, tracing patterns of communication and omission, and noting the implications of each discovery without judgment, only recognition. Every observed behavior, every minute adjustment in the household, contributed to a growing awareness of the broader situation, a framework she would rely upon to navigate the coming days. She moved through the rooms with measured calm, checking details, making subtle observations, recording quietly and efficiently, aware that the power of stillness and thoughtful attention was far greater than any immediate display of emotion could provide. As she finished the last notes of her morning review, Evelyn Parker felt the steady strength of patience and awareness settle fully around her, a quiet yet undeniable presence, ready to guide the careful steps she would take to assert understanding and reclaim agency within the shifting dynamics of her family. By mid-morning, Evelyn Parker had settled into a steady rhythm, moving quietly through the house, her attention sharpened to every nuance in her surroundings. The sunlight streamed through the east-facing windows, illuminating the polished oak floors and reflecting off the brass handles of drawers and cabinets, each detail captured with precise awareness. She revisited her notebook, scanning through observations she had meticulously recorded over the past several days, noting inconsistencies in schedules, unexplained absences, and subtle shifts in behavior from Thomas Parker and Michael, each fragment reinforcing the pattern she had begun to see. The aroma of brewing coffee mingled with the faint scent of old books in the study, a grounding combination that reminded her of quiet mornings long before tensions had emerged. Evelyn took slow, deliberate sips, allowing the warmth to settle and focusing her mind on the sequence of steps that would allow her to reclaim clarity and influence without confrontation. In the dining room, the sunlight cast long shadows across the table, highlighting the perfectly aligned place settings she had arranged, a silent testament to order and attention in a household where control had subtly shifted. She noted the position of each family photograph, some slightly adjusted, others intentionally turned away from view, small indicators of intentional placement and care, all feeding into the larger understanding she was constructing. The ticking of the wall clock punctuated her thoughts, a steady reminder of the passage of time and the importance of measured patience. A faint breeze stirred the curtains, and Evelyn observed the movement, reflecting on the quiet movements within the family, the unspoken decisions, and the subtle manipulations that had gradually defined the present reality. She walked to the hallway, fingers lightly brushing the banister, her eyes catching on minor details she had catalogued, a letter placed just so, a calendar date marked unusually, a note left carelessly on the counter. Each small detail told a story, and Evelyn absorbed them with calm precision, understanding that knowledge and observation were the foundations of quiet influence. She took a moment to look out at the garden, the late autumn sunlight glinting off fallen leaves, feeling the steady rhythm of life continuing beyond her immediate perception, yet fully aware of the patterns and intentions within her home. With a deep breath, she returned to her desk, pen poised over the page, noting the accumulated evidence and insights in clear, structured form, methodically organizing her strategy without haste or distraction. The room was filled with the quiet hum of concentration, and Evelyn Parker felt the steady presence of control settle around her, a calm but undeniable force that allowed her to observe, anticipate, and prepare for the next steps, understanding that the power of thoughtful attention and deliberate patience was far greater than any visible display of emotion could achieve. The late afternoon sun slanted through the living room windows, casting long, narrow beams across the Persian rug and highlighting the dust motes drifting in the still air as Evelyn Parker moved quietly through the house, her senses alert to the smallest detail. She paused at the bookshelf, fingertips brushing the spines of novels and journals, each title familiar and comforting, yet now carrying the weight of context, each memory of shared moments subtly contrasted against the actions she had been observing. The house remained orderly, untouched by haste, a testament to her deliberate presence, and she found a quiet reassurance in that continuity, the calm of her environment mirroring the clarity that had settled within her mind. Michael had returned from work, stepping quietly into the hallway, his greetings courteous but distant, and Evelyn acknowledged him with a slight nod, her expression calm and neutral, observing the cadence of his voice, the rhythm of his movements, and the absence of genuine attentiveness. She noted the positions of family photographs, the angle of the sunlight across the polished coffee table, and the subtle displacements in the living room that might otherwise have gone unnoticed, each observation feeding into a larger understanding of the dynamics at play. Evelyn carried a cup of tea to the study, the steam rising gently as she settled into the chair, spreading her notes in organized sections, reviewing each detail, each discrepancy, each subtle signal that revealed intentions previously hidden. Outside, the autumn breeze shifted the branches of the trees, rustling the leaves in soft waves, a quiet accompaniment to her methodical contemplation, reminding her of the rhythm of time and the steady passage of hours. She moved slowly from room to room, cataloging minor changes, reviewing her observations, noting the patterns that had begun to emerge, and feeling the quiet satisfaction of growing insight and anticipation. Every page she wrote, every line she reviewed, was a deliberate act, a quiet assertion of awareness and control, understanding that the strength of patience and observation far outweighed the immediacy of reaction. The shadows lengthened with the sun, stretching across the hardwood floors, and Evelyn Parker remained seated, absorbing the light and the quiet, feeling the weight of knowledge and the power inherent in the careful attention she had devoted, recognizing that each deliberate step forward was an element of strategy, each observation a foundation for measured action, and that in the stillness and focus of this late afternoon, she was preparing to navigate the next movements of those around her. With subtlety, clarity, and composed authority. As the late afternoon deepened into evening, Evelyn Parker sat quietly in the study, the warm glow of the lamp casting a soft light over her organized notes and neatly stacked papers. She sipped her tea slowly, observing the subtle shift in shadows across the room, each angle and reflection providing a sense of orientation within the familiar space. The quiet tick of the wall clock marked the passage of minutes with steady consistency, a reminder that time moved forward regardless of human maneuvering, and Evelyn embraced that rhythm, allowing it to structure her thoughts and reflections. She reviewed her observations from the past days, tracing sequences of actions, subtle omissions, and calculated gestures from Thomas Parker and Michael, integrating each insight into a cohesive understanding of the household dynamics. Outside, the wind stirred the fallen leaves in gentle swirls, a quiet accompaniment to the stillness inside, and she noted the contrast between the unhurried pace of the environment and the intricate patterns of human intention she had discerned. Evelyn rose to adjust the blinds, allowing a little more light to spill across the hardwood floors, the warmth illuminating the details of the room, the furniture, and the photographs lining the walls, each one a silent witness to years of life carefully documented and now reframed in light of recent events. She moved from the study to the living room, observing the alignment of objects, the slight tilts of frames, the placement of books and notes, small indicators of deliberate arrangement and intent, all contributing to her understanding of the subtle shifts that had occurred. She took a deep breath, feeling the calm authority that comes from deliberate awareness, recognizing that every observation, every detail carefully noted, built a foundation of knowledge and control that would guide her actions in the days to come. Evelyn returned to the study, spreading out her papers once more, reviewing the patterns she had identified, and noting potential points of leverage, each marked with precision, each insight catalogued without haste. The quiet of the evening, punctuated only by the distant sounds of neighborhood life and the soft hum of the refrigerator, emphasized the contrast between the stillness of her methodical approach and the chaotic assumptions of those who had overlooked her attentiveness. She reflected on the importance of measured patience, on the power of observation without immediate reaction, and on the deliberate cultivation of understanding that allowed for precise and effective responses. Evelyn Parker leaned back in her chair, letting the soft glow of the lamp envelop her, feeling the sense of readiness that comes from careful preparation, the awareness that knowledge and timing were her allies, and that in the quiet, composed presence she maintained, she had already begun to reclaim a sense of influence and authority within her household, every detail of the evening reinforcing the foundation for deliberate, considered action in the moments to come. The soft light of early evening filled the Parker residence, casting a warm glow across the hardwood floors and highlighting the subtle patterns of sunlight through the blinds as Evelyn Parker moved carefully from room to room, her eyes scanning every detail with deliberate attention. She paused by the window, observing the garden outside where the last remnants of autumn leaves shifted gently in the breeze, each movement a quiet counterpoint to the stillness within the house. Her thoughts traced the events of the past days, cataloging small but significant signs of Thomas Parker's and Michael's intentions, the timing of departures, the precise placement of objects, and the barely perceptible alterations in the household that spoke louder than words. Evelyn settled into the living room chair, notebook open on her lap, pen poised, and methodically reviewed the notes she had taken, sequences of communications, altered schedules, patterns of exclusion, and the subtle manipulations that had become apparent in her absence of immediate confrontation. Each observation reinforced her understanding, building a clear map of the household dynamics, the careful calculations that had shifted control, and the strategies she would employ to navigate these complexities. The faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of neighborhood activity underscored the quiet intensity of her focus, and Evelyn allowed herself a moment to notice the way the sunlight reflected off the polished surfaces, the alignment of photographs, and the careful arrangement of furniture, each element a testament to her ongoing observation. She sipped her tea slowly, the warmth anchoring her as she considered the implications of her findings and the precise timing of her next steps, understanding that patience and attention were the most effective tools at her disposal. In the study, papers were spread with care, each labeled and cross-referenced, a visual representation of her methodical approach, while the room remained undisturbed, a sanctuary for thought and reflection. She noted how the subtle shifts in Michael's behavior, the hesitant tones in his voice, and the casual omissions in conversation fit into the broader narrative she had been constructing, each detail reinforcing her awareness and anticipation. Outside, the fading light marked the transition of the day, and Evelyn Parker recognized the quiet power of stillness, the strength of observation, and the cumulative force of attentive preparation. Every movement, every note taken, every detail catalogued contributed to a growing clarity, a strategic comprehension that allowed her to approach the challenges before her with calm authority, understanding that in the measured observation of the present, she was quietly establishing the foundations for control, insight, and deliberate, thoughtful action in the unfolding days ahead. The late afternoon shifted toward evening as Evelyn Parker moved through the quiet rooms of her home, the soft golden light filtering through the blinds and casting patterns across the polished hardwood floors. She paused by the kitchen counter, her notebook open, pen poised, and reviewed the carefully noted observations she had gathered over the past week, each line a step closer to understanding the precise movements and intentions of Thomas Parker and Michael. Every small detail she had recorded, the subtle rearrangement of furniture, the slight changes in conversation, the omitted invitations, now formed a coherent map that revealed both motive and pattern. She moved to the living room, brushing her fingers across the spines of the books and the edges of picture frames, noting their placement and orientation, the sunlight catching the glass and highlighting the images within, the familiar faces now observed in a new context, each expression a reminder of trust and memory contrasted with recent deception. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of neighborhood activity provided a quiet soundtrack to her reflection, and she sipped her tea, letting the warmth focus her mind as she considered the implications of the details she had meticulously recorded. In the study, she spread out additional documents, organizing and cross-referencing correspondence, schedules, and household notes, the careful system reflecting the methodical approach she had adopted, a framework of knowledge built quietly but deliberately. Evelyn observed how subtle gestures, overlooked absences, and delayed responses had all contributed to a larger narrative, and she catalogued these with precision, acknowledging the layers of intent without judgment, only recognition. She paused at the window, watching the wind stir the remaining autumn leaves, each turning in the air a reflection of subtle shifts and unseen currents, and she realized that understanding these movements provided her with the foundation to anticipate and respond thoughtfully. Each action she considered was measured, deliberate, with awareness that the power lay in observation and timing, in the accumulation of knowledge rather than immediate reaction. The shadows lengthened as the sun dipped lower, stretching across the floors and highlighting the meticulous order of her surroundings, and Evelyn Parker felt the quiet authority of comprehension settle fully, a steady presence that anchored her and allowed her to prepare for the interactions and decisions to come. Every note, every observation, every careful consideration reinforced the clarity she had cultivated, a calm but potent force that would guide her actions with precision, ensuring that each step she took in the days ahead was deliberate, informed, and grounded in the patient power of attentive awareness. The soft light of early evening had shifted to a deeper amber as Evelyn Parker moved deliberately through the house, the familiar spaces now observed with renewed focus and intent. She paused in the hallway, noticing the angle of the photographs and the subtle shifts in the placement of furniture, each detail a reflection of habits and adjustments she had catalogued over the previous days. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the distant hum of neighborhood activity, yet the silence was rich with the presence of thought and careful attention. Evelyn carried a cup of tea to the living room, setting it down gently on the side table, and settled into her chair, notebook open on her lap, reviewing the observations she had accumulated with meticulous precision. Each line, each note, represented a step toward comprehension, a way to anticipate the actions and responses of Thomas Parker and Michael, and she traced patterns, sequences, and subtle interactions, integrating them into a coherent understanding of the household dynamics. Outside, the late autumn wind rustled the remaining leaves in the garden, a gentle accompaniment to the calm and steady rhythm of her reflections, and she allowed herself a small, quiet acknowledgement of the continuity of time and the inevitability of change. Evelyn noted the alignment of objects, the careful placement of keys and letters, the subtle gestures that indicated attention or avoidance, and recorded them with precise attention, building a mental and physical map of influence and understanding. She sipped her tea, feeling the warmth spread slowly through her body, grounding her as she considered potential strategies, each measured in thought and observation, free from haste or emotional reaction. The light in the living room shifted as the sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows across the hardwood floors, illuminating the small details she had come to notice, a slight tilt in a picture frame, a misaligned book, the faint residue of a recent movement of objects. Each detail, catalogued and understood, added clarity and insight, reinforcing the patient and deliberate approach she had cultivated. Evelyn reflected on the quiet power inherent in observation and awareness, in the careful recording of patterns and tendencies, and in the measured consideration of every step before action. The evening deepened, and with each passing moment, Evelyn Parker felt the steady assurance of preparation, the subtle authority that comes from understanding and insight, and the quiet confidence that her attentive and deliberate awareness would guide her through the decisions and interactions that lay ahead, allowing her to navigate the household dynamics with precision, patience, and calm authority. As night fell and the house settled into a deeper, hushed calm, Evelyn Parker remained seated in the study, the soft lamplight illuminating the notes and documents she had organized over the past several days. The quiet of the evening allowed her to consider every detail she had observed with a clarity that daylight often obscured, each movement, omission, and subtle shift now forming a complete and coherent understanding of the household dynamics. She reviewed her notes, tracing the sequence of events, the patterns of behavior, and the precise timing of actions by Thomas Parker and Michael, integrating all the fragments into a map of awareness that informed her next steps. The familiar spaces of the home, the polished hardwood floors, the arrangement of furniture, the framed photographs along the walls, seemed to hold a new significance, each detail providing insight and confirmation of the larger picture she had constructed. Evelyn reflected on the quiet mornings, the subtle conversations, the small adjustments that had previously gone unnoticed, and now recognized them as deliberate and revealing. She sipped her tea slowly, letting the warmth and familiarity anchor her as she considered the implications and the opportunities to respond thoughtfully and with control. Outside, the late autumn wind rustled the remaining leaves, their movements gentle yet deliberate, echoing the subtle rhythms she had been attuned to within the house. Evelyn observed the alignment of objects, the placement of notes, and the slight displacements in her environment, cataloging them carefully as evidence of intention and planning, understanding that her awareness itself was a form of influence and authority. She moved through the rooms with deliberate calm, checking details and reinforcing her understanding, recognizing that the power of patience, observation, and measured preparation was far more effective than any overt confrontation could be. Each page of her notebook, each note, and every carefully considered observation contributed to a comprehensive sense of control, allowing her to navigate the household with precision and subtlety. The evening deepened, the shadows stretching across the floors and walls, and Evelyn Parker felt a steady, quiet assurance settle over her, the culmination of days of attentive awareness, careful reflection, and deliberate planning. She understood that knowledge, insight, and patience had given her a position of calm strength, and that with this foundation, she could approach the coming days with confidence, clarity, and composed authority, ready to manage the household dynamics and ensure that her presence, understanding, and careful actions guided the outcomes she had been patiently preparing for, each observation and deliberate step reinforcing her quiet yet undeniable influence.